Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is, of course, Charles Q. Banks, and I'd like to welcome you back to the 13th day of the Daily Bible Commentary 365 Own It 365 Whole Bible Plan. Today we are dealing with Genesis 29 and 30, as well as Job 21. So, let's get into it. Jacob's story picks up by Jacob rolling a giant boulder by himself off of a well. Now, of course, the setup for this, if you read it, is that he is by himself, he's in the wilderness, he sees a well, and very much like Moses' story, when he gets driven into the wilderness, he sees a well, and thieves, taking the water and keeping the female servants and daughters of one of the other patriarchs, step patriarchs. I don't know if you could call them that. He saves them from them by helping them get to the well. And Jacob does a similar thing here. He sees men, Hittites and Philistines, keeping the wells covered with massive stones. And this is something in the ancient world. You may not know that it's massive here, but in the ancient world, and by the context, you can understand that these are massive stones that, a few women cannot, and servants cannot move, male or female, by themselves. It takes a large number of people to move such a massive boulder out of the way. And it's shown that Rachel is there with servants trying to get water. And Jacob goes and by himself pushes the boulder off of the well. This is one of the few, but very real instances of, godly powers working in someone to do things beyond regular human ability. This is basically another miracle here. And after he does this, he helps out the Rachel, basically, to get water, and he sees her and kisses her on sight, goes right up to her and kisses her. It says he was weeping, he was emotional, and so Rachel takes him back to Laban. He says, guess what? I am your father's brother's son. So take me to your family. I'm basically going to marry you. And so they bring him back to Laban, and he meets with Laban, and he meets the daughter Leah, who apparently has weak eyes, but Rachel was beautiful. And that's a strange thing to say about Leah, that she had weak eyes. Does that mean that her eyes were not beautiful, and Rachel was beautiful in contrast? Or did that mean that she herself could not see well? I don't know. But either way, it's a very interesting detail, and gives us a little bit of characterization, much needed characterization and detail that we usually don't get from these biblical references. Again, she's beautiful, and probably just as beautiful as Rebecca was to Isaac, and Sarah was to Abraham. All these women are just beautiful people. I don't know what to say about that. It's just an observation. This is what this video and these shows are all about. So, this is the same Laban as was Rebecca's brother, obviously, who is the father of course, Rachel and Leah, and he dupes Jacob into marrying Leah, while at night, at the wedding ceremony for Rachel, he switches them in the dark, and, you know what happens. Jacob takes Leah into the tent, and in the morning he wakes up, and who it is but weak-eyed Leah, and he goes to Laban and says, what did you do? What have you done to me? Give me Rachel. And he says, not unless you work for her. So the interesting to note is not only that he had to work 7 years for Rachel, but he already did work 7 years for Laban for Rachel, because he didn't have a dowry on him. Isaac did not give Jacob a dowry when he sent him to take a wife for himself. this is crazy. Abraham, when he sent his servant to go find Rebekah for Isaac, he gave him tons of riches, and yet Isaac, who himself was completely rich, filthy rich, did not give his son enough for a dowry for Rachel. Again, it borders on hatred from Isaac for Jacob. If you're getting these names mixed up, I don't blame you. It's really hard for me too to keep them all straight. So anyway, he has to work 7 years as a dowry because he doesn't have anything. That's the important thing to remember. So he does this. 14 years he spends fighting, working for Laban to get Rachel. And it's interesting to me that in these days there was no form of divorce. It wasn't until Moses that there was any legal form of divorce. That's why I think the Egyptians and the Hittites thought so much of adultery, that it was such a bad thing, because you couldn't, get divorced. And if you married someone else's wife, then you're bringing wrath on your nation. You could have multiple wives, but not the wife of someone else. Um, so it's kind of a catch-22 there, morally speaking, for these people. But anyway, so he takes both Leah and Rachel, and a competition for the birth of all of Jacob's children begins, and it's a very savage one. Um, and yeah, it's a competition for how many children each woman could have, and that means that to them meant favor from God and also favor in the eyes of the husband, and that's what they were going for, was mainly favor in the eyes of the husband. It's like, who would go to bed with him that night, which is crazy, crazy. It's so horrible. We've come very far to the basically the opposite extreme in these days, what with feminism and all. But I won't get much more further into that. It's a very convoluted thing. Um, so yeah, God sees the plight of Leah, that she was not chosen by Isaac. She's the second, second in line, so to speak, the accident wife, and she is not favored by uh, Jacob. I think I said Isaac, but anyway, by Jacob. She's not favored, and so God favors her instead, giving her the first children. Rachel, of course, is absolutely dashed by the fact that she cannot have children. She also, the third in the line of wives of the patriarchs, is also barren. This is the third time. It's incredible, this theme happening again and again, and it always has to do with the seed narrative, the seed that there will be a Messiah coming through Abraham's lineage. And so Rachel believes that she is cast out of that if she cannot have children, and therefore she comes to him and says, "Give me children or I'll die," which is quite an overreaction. But and Jacob is very circumspect in all this. He goes, "What do you think I have to do with you having children? I do all the best I can, but that's up to God." So Rachel then has Isaac go. Rachel, yeah, has Jacob go into her servant on her behalf, just like the other, wives, through Bilhah, who, like, Zilpah and Keturah, seem to have been forgotten by many Christians, pastors, scholars, and historians. Rightly so. Like, there's a reason why they don't remember them, because it's really a shameful thing to have the patriarch go into a servant and go into sleep with. I'm using the biblical language here, and so yeah, it's just, you don't really want to remember those sticky, mucky parts of the Bible, the muddy gray area. It's not that gray. It's just basically black. That they would have polygamy going on so blatantly. But to them, it was just, can't have children. Go into my servant, and we'll have children by her. And it's like, what? How does that mean that you have children by him? It doesn't make sense. So anyway, this competition and the bearing of children continues back and forth till the 12 tribes of Israel are born. Their heads are born. So when Jacob decides to leave after the 12 are born, um, he goes to tell Laban that he wishes to leave Laban's land, and Laban reveals that he is a diviner now, that he has divined through divination that Jacob had been favored of God, and that through Jacob, Laban was being blessed. All of there was wealth and prosperity because Jacob was working for him. And so he's like, if you leave, then the blessing of God won't be upon me. Don't you pity me? So stay with me. Trying to be very, very cunning here. Um, and Laban, is not willing to let him go. Um, and so, yeah, that's basically how this ends. Laban is just saying, no, don't go away, stay with me. But Jacob's like, I basically have to go, and that's how it ends. So we have to move to Job 21 now, changing directions completely. And it's very, very short. I don't have a whole lot to say about this, but Job replies to Bildad, Bildad, and says the ultimate line that I think is really powerful for any time period, and this is the biggest issue in life, is dealing with this question. Why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? No rod of God is upon them. They grow fat, they have children, and their children inherit their wealth. Finally, Job brings up the supposed unfairness of life. And this is the second time it's mentioned, but this time he really goes into it in Job chapter 21. And that's the problem that many atheists and secular people have, is that if there were a God, then the righteous would be blessed, and the wicked would always be accursed, and we would be able to see that. But that's not the purpose of this life. That's not God's will. Actually, is not just for the righteous to prosper and the wicked to suffer. In fact, it happens the opposite so much of the time. But there is also universal grace poured out on everyone and universal suffering. We all suffer to some degree in this life. And as I've said before, life is pain to a degree. You come out of the womb screaming, and you die either, alone. You always die alone is something that some people have always said. Like, in your own mind, you've seen life in a certain way through your eyes, and no one else has experienced it with you. And even if someone dies at the same time as you, you're experiencing that yourself, and no one can experience it in the same way you are. So that's very despairing, that causes depression in a lot of people. And suicide is a very logical idea if there is no God who blesses the good and curses the wicked. But there is a God who blesses the good and curses the wicked, just not in our timing and outside of our control. And so he does this mainly in the afterlife. We are eternal creatures, and this life is only a small smidgen of what we will actually experience. And life is actually pretty fair, because life goes beyond the grave. So I'll just leave you with that. Just hope I sparked some thoughts here. So thanks for watching. God bless.